Next up, we have Call Me By Your Name, directed by Luca Guadagnino and written by James Ivory based on the book by Andre Achiman. Led by Armie Hammer, Timothy Chalamet, Michael Stuhlbarg, and Amira Kassar. This film had a global box office of $41 million off a budget of $3.5 million. The film chronicles the blossoming and complicated love between Elio, a 17-year-old boy, and Oliver, a 24-year-old graduate student working as an intern for Elio's father for the summer at their vacation home in Italy.
Call Me By Your Name, in my opinion, is truly a masterpiece in every sense of the word. The filmmaking, the characters, acting, cinematography, editing, the aesthetic. I love everything about this movie. It was my favorite movie to come out of 2017. I was absolutely blown away. We saw this in theaters. It was a beautiful experience to have in a movie theater. I cried multiple times the first time, second, maybe third time I even saw this. It's really emotional, highly relatable, and again, it's just a beautiful film.
I agree, although I put it on my number 2 on my list of 2017. Blade Runner 2049 was my number 1. We've talked about in the past. But Call Me By Your Name, I think, is one of the best films about love I've ever seen. It centers upon the ideas of understanding who you are and accepting who you are and allowing yourself to feel what you feel and not repressing anything.
And Luca is a very patient director. He takes his time, crafting this world in the year 1983 in this beautiful setting of these tiny, small villages like Crema in Italy. And he patiently builds this romance between Elio and Oliver. And this patience is conveyed in one of the early scenes between the two where Oliver asks Elio, what is there to do around the town? And Elio basically says, wait for summer to end. And this patience leads to an immense payoff when the two men finally reveal their feelings for each other, which takes about an hour into the film to happen. And it makes this connection much more deserved. And it's a great experience for the audience to finally see it.
It's a really beautiful movie. It's just about two people falling in love. And the way they go about it is so atypical from what we usually see. Like you said, it doesn't happen until an hour into the movie because this film it's all about subtleties and behavior and the small micro adjustments and hints we give other people to show our attraction for each other. And it's not a blatant, overt, no one's saying their feelings out loud. People, like the characters behave how we behave in real life. You know what I mean? When we meet someone and we want to become intimate with them, we take our time and we do things and we act a certain way to show our affection and show that we're interested. And also there's also uncertainties when you start to see someone and you're unsure of how to act, and you want to do things in the right way, but sometimes things don't work out the way you plan.
Some of these feelings you're afraid to embrace, and I think that's one of the main things we'll talk about a little bit. But this film, I've seen so many reviews of people being critical about it being too slow and too long. And I understand that some people, you don't like slow movies. You like fast-paced, you like action. That's kind of like the era we're living in right now where a lot of these high-budget action movies are coming out, and we're constantly inundated with quick dialogue, quick, funny humor, and like boom, 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 line, helicopter explosion, here we go. But the whole point of film is escapism. And if you let it, a slowly paced film like Call Me By Your Name, and honestly, I'm not saying slowly in a negative way. I think it's a very effective tool in this film. It draws you into a new world. Turn off your phone and watch this movie. You got to eliminate distractions to watch a movie like this to actually experience it. Otherwise, you can't understand the true nature of the art that the filmmakers are creating.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it is the strong suit of this film is how they slowly show this romance blossom. And I think that one of my favorite parts about the film, and I know it is of yours, is the setting of the film. This Italian village in 1983, and as the characters explore and go to new places and have experiences, you just kind of feel like you wish you were there with them. I kind of wished I grew up in that villa.
Oh, absolutely. Kinda. I do wish.
Yeah. And it's just the surroundings of these characters really pull you in, and Luca created this kind of dreamlike quality within the filmmaking and how he photographed everything. He actually shot the entire film with just a 35 millimeter lens, nothing else. And so I think that brings a strong consistency to everything you visually see. Whereas if you go with like a long lens to a wide lens, you can see very different creative visuals. Whereas since it's 35 the entire time, the entire film is kind of balanced visually. You know what I mean? And I think he really sets up the world in a profound way that makes you feel like you're actually living there with these characters and you actually really want to be there with them.
Yeah, he does a beautiful job of blending in so many shots of like B-roll, of environments, of the characters who aren't even like looking towards the camera or just kind of like doing something on their own. Like shots of like Elio like at his desk or like in bed, just the back of his shoulders. He gets so many shots of the architecture of buildings, the house, the interiors, the exteriors of nature, simple things like the bathing suits on the faucets. It really pulls you into this atmosphere and this environment.
You're right. And I think that he does that because those are things that most movies would never show. Most movies, they only show you what's important, what's vital to the story. Whereas he's trying to show you all these moments, all these images, and all these beats that, yes, it's not exactly relevant to the overall plot, but it's a part of experience. And if you lived in that villa, you would see your bathing suit drying on that faucet every day. And so I think that's why he shows all these little things, because those are little things, those are little bites of life.
Initially, Oliver and Elio seem like polar opposites when they're first introduced. And, you know, Oliver has this like very hunky American look about him. He's tall, blonde. He's a little jacked. He's tan. He's intelligent.
He's very confident. And you can tell he has like a sexual nature about him. He knows who he is.
He has a very deep and booming voice. He's very laid back or cavalier. He's definitely, you can tell, has grown into manhood because he's mid-20s. He's 24 years old. Mm-hmm. Whereas Elio is this music prodigy. He's soft-spoken, emotional. He's very private. He still looks like a boy, even though he's just becoming a man, and he has like the wit and intelligence of someone beyond his years. So the biggest difference between the two of them is their life experience, where, like I just said, Oliver has grown into manhood, whereas Elio is just finally experiencing adulthood and finally becoming a man.
I think a great way Luca shows this is when Elio is shaving in the mirror, and he just shaves just his mustache area, because that's the only area he can grow hair right now. And so it's a visual representation of how young he is and how he's still he's still in the process of becoming an adult, whereas, like you said, Oliver already is an adult.
And the chemistry between Armie and Chalamet is absolutely off the charts in this film.
That is dynamic.
And the thing about it is they're both heterosexual men in real life, and they signed up for this film as gay lovers. And the way that Luca wanted to break the ice for these two men to give them that intimate and romantic feeling for each other is they had one rehearsal for this movie when they got to set in Italy, and the first and only scene they rehearsed was they went into the yard on the back of the house, and he had them rehearse just the most passionate, intimate lovemaking scene where they just had to make out basically in the grass for several minutes, and Luke is just telling them to get more passionate and passionate and passionate, and the crew's all around watching them. And then slowly Luca had him and the rest of the crew just drift away, and they all left the area. And then after several more minutes of passion and making out, Armie Hammer and Timothée Chalamet just looked up and no one was around them at all. So it's the perfect icebreaker.
Yeah, that's a great way to break the ice,
because that's what they signed up for. You know, you gotta get this going. Let's do this. This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is also brought to you by Manscaped, the leaders in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your comfort, obsesses over technology developments to provide you with the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped has been awesome. They sent us their performance packages. Thank you, Kyle, so much for hooking it up. This includes their luxury lawnmower groomer, weed whacker, as well as toners, deodorants, shirts, and boxer briefs. Get 20% off your order and free shipping using coupon code Raiders of the Lost at checkout. Again, Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. And this shouldn't just be an exclusive ad for just men. Ladies, women, if you got a boyfriend, brother, siblings, father, cousins, you need to get some gifts for a friend. This is stuff that men and guys really, really want in their life. This is a gift that if they open up, they'd be like, no freaking way.
If I got this grooming package from Manscaped for Christmas, I would be through the moon.
Winter is coming. That means that we're all sitting at home and we got to groom at some point. So this is perfect for people who, it's COVID. We're still in lockdown. We're still quarantined. We need to take care of our bodies.
Gotta look good on camera, man.
We're telling you, any guy would freak out if they got something from manscaped.com. I swear to God, I have never used better clippers or buzzers in my life. The briefs are awesome, super comfortable. Shirts are super comfortable. Highly recommend the brand. Again, Raiders of the Lost at checkout for 20% off and free shipping.
And I understand that some people had a problem with the fact that both the leads are actually heterosexual in real life, but also the director, Luca, is a gay man. And I think that if he believes it's necessary for these two actors to play the roles, I don't think he cared what their sexuality is in real life. He just wanted the best actors possible for these particular parts, and he felt that Chalamet and Hammer were the right choices for these roles in particular. And so I don't think it's a problem, especially because Luca is a gay man and also a gay filmmaker, which is a great thing.
I don't have an issue with it at all. I mean, they're actors. That's at the end of the story, at the end of the day, they're actors. I'm sure there are plenty of gay men and women who play straight characters in film. Obviously, I don't have the experiences of a homosexual, so I can't really give a voice to that demographic and those kinds of people. But for me, I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, me too. As you said, the chemistry between these two guys is palpable, but at first it's not so. So for the first half of the film, Elio seems to not really like Oliver at all, and he even calls him arrogant. So why do you think he seems to be butting heads with Oliver in a way?
When I watched the first act of this film, I noticed that a lot of it is time spent of Elio observing Oliver. He's kind of just watching him from a distance. Like you said, he does call him arrogant. Maybe he doesn't
Arrogante.
Arrogante at times, especially when he says later and stuff like that. I think it's because Elio sees so much about Oliver that he wishes he was, that at first he comes to despise Oliver over all these traits that he wishes he had, like the confidence and the
Wearing the necklace.
the Jewish necklace, wearing the Star of David, all these things that, again, we're talking about life experience and where Oliver has grown into adulthood and Elio still becoming a man, that I think it's because Elio wishes he was at the stage in life that Oliver was at.
That's a really great point. I can totally agree with that. I also think that the reason why he doesn't seem to like Oliver at first is because I think that when Elio starts interacting with Oliver and sees him, like you said, he observes him multiple times, I think that deep down Elio finds him attractive and is feeling feelings towards him, and he doesn't understand it because this is obviously the first man he's ever had intimate feelings about. And so I think since he doesn't understand what he's feeling, he rejects it. And so he becomes antagonistic towards Oliver because he's kind of rejecting what his body desires. One of this film's main themes, you brought it up, is desire. Elio's character, his main journey in this film, I think, is that he begins developing these desires for another man, and he begins repressing them, and he tries to shut them out at first. And he doesn't really understand them, and he's trying to make sense of what he's feeling. And he's struggling and trying to come to terms with what exactly he's experiencing and what exactly he's desiring when he's around Oliver.
Exactly, and the perfect example of that is when they're outdoors at the volleyball match playing, and Oliver is playing volleyball. He comes over to get a drink of water, and he caresses Elio's shoulder. And there's a couple seconds where Elio just looks at the shoulder. And he doesn't know how to react to Oliver touching him.
Yeah, he starts rubbing it.
And so then he reacts like in a spastic way and tries to back off from him. And then Oliver again comes back and puts both arms on his shoulder. And this is Oliver throwing out a sign like, I'm attracted to you, and I want to see if you're attracted to me or see if this is something that you'd be interested in, basically. Mm-hmm. And like you just said, Elio still doesn't know how to come to terms with his desires that he's been trying to maybe suppressing, or he's afraid to embrace. He's afraid to follow those feelings, which he's feeling for Oliver. And unfortunately, this forces them to never really connect until an hour into the film, because Oliver at this point realizes, like, holy crap, I just freaked this kid out.
Yeah.
This guy wants nothing to do with me, so I might as well just live out the rest of the summer like this never happened.
Exactly. In the first half of this film, Luca uses this brilliant symbolism of apricots, which are prevalent throughout this movie. If you watch the film closely, and upon repeat viewings, in the first half of the film, whenever Elio and Oliver interact in a scene, apricots are always visible, or a shot of them precede the scene themselves. So it can be the apricot trees, it can be apricots, the fruit actually being eaten or on the tables, or it can be the apricot juice, which can be sitting on a table between them, or it can be either of them can be drinking the apricot juice. And so Luca sprinkles apricots throughout the romance of the film. The symbolism of apricots are not an accident. Luca's a very intelligent filmmaker. And I believe that the apricots in this film, apricot represents Elio's desire. And it's kind of like, in a way, the forbidden fruit. Having apricots shown in all of these scenes where Elio and Oliver are interacting are literally showing Elio's desire, and it's Oliver. And so the fruit relates to desire. And then there's actually a really great scene where Oliver is explaining the root history of the word apricot and where it comes from. I think the author put this monologue in the book because, yes, it relates to the apricot, which is desire, but also by dissecting the historical roots of the word apricot, the different pronunciations of apricot in different ancient languages, you say the word cock in different words. The word cock is said multiple times. And so I have Armie Hammer's lines written right here. So it goes, Oliver explains, quote, "It's a long story, so bear with me. Many Latin words are derived from the Greek. In the case of apricot, however, it's the other way around. Here, the Greek takes over from the Latin. The Latin word was praecocum, from praecocer, and precook, to ripen early, as in precocious, meaning premature." And then he says, the Byzantines, to go on, borrowed praecox and praecoca, or barokoki, and then finally the Arabs inherited al-barakok. And so Oliver, by explaining the words of apricot's history, is literally saying the word cock multiple times, which is a metaphor for both he and Elio's sexual desires.
That's good stuff right there.
Yeah, man. I didn't notice it until I think the second time I watched this movie, and then I just noticed he kept saying the word cock over and over again.
I never picked up on that.
Yeah, so I think it really
very
is
subtle.
It's a very subtle metaphor for who they are.
Yeah, and again, I think the peach later on represents the bridge and connection between them succumbing to their feelings and their desires, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
One of the main differences from the novel that Luca threw in was the symbolism and story plots of archaeology and history. So the professor digging up the statue from the water, going over the cataloging of the images of statues. And so I think the significance of archaeology and history relate to the idea of history, our histories, our personal histories, and our past. We all have gone through relationships. We've all been in love in the past. We all have histories with other people, very intimate histories with other people who are no longer in our lives, but they're in our history. Or do they become frozen? Because they kind of do, in a way, become frozen in time from our point of view. Because, so say I have a relationship with someone and we broke up years ago. If I look back on it, all I know is that person from back then. I don't know who they are now at this present time. But for me, they're kind of frozen like a statue in time from my perspective. You know what I mean? And so I think that the ideas and themes of archaeology relate to that relationships we have with the past from our past experiences with other relationships.
To bounce that off with the archaeological immersion of the statues coming out of the water, at this point in the story, Oliver and Elio are kind of like going back and forth. They're kind of, at times bickering, but also they're trying to be polite and nice to each other at the same time. Elio holds out the arm of the statue to Oliver, and maybe that's a sign of them both. Obviously, they're making the truce, but also they're both accepting their pasts and connecting their past, and they're connecting the time, like you just said, frozen in time of their new budding relationship, which will come in a little bit, and just to speed up a little bit, is towards the end of the film, Oliver has to leave at some point, and Elio basically spends the third act of the film trying to freeze this period of time in his life and to freeze these moments and keep them, like you can say, like statues in history.
Yeah, exactly. Because this whole film kind of feels like it's just a series of memories for a person. You know what I mean? It feels like Elio is looking back on this summer and what he remembers and what his experiences were. And so it feels like this movie is from someone's past just from watching it already.
So let's move on to when they start to build their intimate relationship. And it first starts first Elio decides to get the confidence of when Elio's mother is reading the story of the French 16th Tale of the Night, which was in German, which she's translating, who doesn't know whether to speak or die. And the woman in the story says it's better to speak, but she's on her guard and senses a trap, which is a perfect description of Elio, This episode of Raiders of the Lost podcast is brought to you by our friends at movieposters.com. Use coupon code RAIDERS15 for 15% off your order today. Movieposters.com is the #1 site to get your movie posters and has been for years. They've been great to work with. They're sponsoring our new giveaway contest, and they offer great options of original designs, framing, backlight, canvas, even plaque designs. Raiders15 to get 15% off your order today at movieposters.com.
Elio is terrified to tell Oliver how he feels, and he's afraid to speak just like the knight is.
Yeah, like I talked about earlier, where this whole film, a lot of it is about being afraid to embrace your desires. And in the story, the knight doesn't speak, but Elio eventually does. And this happens when there's going to pick up some papers in town, and they come to that World War I statue, the Battle of Piave, where Elio finally confesses to Oliver his feelings for him, basically, and that despite being so talented and so intelligent and knowing everything about everything, he knows nothing about the things that matter. And he gives Oliver this confession. Lucas shot it beautifully. They're on opposite sides of this big monument, so just like in the story, Elio is staying on his guard and senses a trap despite, at this moment, confessing his feelings for him. So he's doing it from a distance, from a safe distance, behind a fence, behind this giant monument. And it's this terrific long take. Probably the best shot in the entire movie. This beautiful long take has a lot of different moving parts in it with characters in the background and cars and a bus and everything. And I think it's my favorite scene in the entire movie.
And it's very subtle. It is one of my favorite scenes too, where Elio doesn't come out and really say it, but Oliver understands what he's telling him. And I think the reason why Elio doesn't strictly speak it out loud is because he's afraid of how Oliver will react. And also, they're kind of afraid of the surroundings. They're afraid of anyone hearing, and it wasn't a great time and a place for gay people back then. And so he's still trying to be a little secretive about it. This leads to their first intimate moment together. But before that, they go on this amazing bike ride, which makes you fall more in love with this village. And one of my favorite moments is, it's completely irrelevant to the story, but it means everything to the setting.
Can I guess what you're going to say?
Yeah.
When they race?
No.
Oh, never mind.
It's when they've been biking for a while, and they're out of breath and they're thirsty, and they stop by that small house, and there's an older woman picking green beans, and Elio just goes up to her and asks her for a glass of water, and then she goes inside and brings them each a glass of water. And it shows you that, like, this village in this town and this time is like you wouldn't do that anywhere nowadays. Like, where would you do that? You couldn't walk up to someone's house and be like, hey, can I have a glass of water?
Can you imagine, like, maybe in farm country, but like knocking on your neighbor's door to ask for water? They'd be like, you want water?
Exactly. So it's a really nice little tidbit to show what exactly this world they're in is, and what it was like to be in this place and to live here, and how residents interacted with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just to go back real quickly on how you said it wasn't a good time for homosexuality, this is 1980s, and this is Europe, and Italy especially. We're used to a lot of films about gay romance or gay characters like Milk, Carol, Moonlight, which we'll talk about in a little bit, Brokeback Mountain, where a lot of these characters, a lot of these stories, they're faced with intense obstacles of social pressure or violence, being shamed. And I think one of the strengths of this film is, yes, there are, some obstacles that they have to face in terms of being persecuted for their feelings and desires and their sexual orientations. But Luca does a great job. We're spending most of the film in these small towns, these small villages, so it doesn't really become a factor. Besides the fact that it doesn't really become a factor, and especially because Elio's family is very welcoming and supportive of any decision he makes in his life. So it's a very welcoming experience for anyone who's been persecuted in their life.
I think that's a strength to the film as well, because this film portrays homosexuality as these characters don't face persecution for being gay. And also, they even changed the time of the story. It was supposed to be 1987, but they changed it to 83 because they wanted to set the story before the AIDS epidemic. They didn't want there to be any harm or persecution or negative repercussions done to these characters for just being themselves that you would see in all these other movies. But by making the film and the conflict small in scope, they kept the story just about the emotional connection between these two characters, which I think worked in its favor.
So after Elio confesses his feelings for Oliver at the monument, Elio takes Oliver to his secret spot, which is a very beautiful scene, but it's also important to Elio and his character because him showing Oliver his secret spot that he doesn't take anybody else, where he only goes by himself to read books and he can't even count how many books he's read there. This is basically Elio opening his heart to Oliver, opening his emotions and feelings to Oliver, and basically showing Oliver what his true desires are and letting him into his life.
That's a great point. And then that leads to their first kiss, which is a combination of romantic and awkward and funny, and just like it's not Elio's first kiss, but it's his first kiss with a man, so it is like it's his first kiss in his life. And you feel like the awkwardness and the uncertainty that he's feeling, you know what I mean? But also that the desire that he has and how badly he wants this. And he seems to be in that moment very happy because he's finally being himself.
But for the time being, this really doesn't go anywhere after this, and Oliver ends up kind of, I wouldn't say shunning Elio, but he kind of starts to ignore him.
Keeps a distance
because he doesn't want it to affect his relationship. Obviously, he's there basically to be an assistant to his father. He wants to, at this moment, keep it professional, and he doesn't want to corrupt what he thinks will corrupt Elio. He even says something like, we haven't done anything to be ashamed of yet. We should keep it that way. Mm-hmm. And this forces Elio to desire Oliver even more. And it's all he can think of, even when he starts to date Marzia, who is another French person like Elio, vacationing in Italy. She speaks French fluently, in English too. But she also vacations there. And they develop a romance. But this is kind of like Elio's fill-in for his true desires.
He's trying to feed his desire, and he even has sex with Marzia a few times, but it's not satiable for him. And it doesn't even compare to what he wants from Oliver.
And so Elio loses his virginity to Marzia, and then he can't take the silence anymore. He can't take the distance from Oliver, despite having this budding romance with this beautiful young French woman.
He also thinks that Oliver is going out on the town and probably have sleeping with women.
Yeah, and he even calls him a traitor. Calls him a traitor multiple times in bed. Because he's just waiting for Oliver to take the next step in what he wants to happen. And eventually, Elio can't take it anymore, so he writes that note, can't take the silence, I need to talk to you. And he leaves the note for Oliver to find in the morning, and then he finds a note on his desk that says, grow up, see you at midnight, which is hysterical. And then, so now Elio has to deal with probably the longest day of his entire life, where he basically just doesn't know what to do with himself, and he's just sitting around waiting for the hours to go by. He's constantly looking at his watch. He looks at his watch immediately when he reads the note.
Even when when Marzia comes over, he looks at his watch when they're in the pool, and then when they go up to that attic to have sex, as she's lying on the bed, this girl's literally lying on his bed, but then he takes his watch off and he places it carefully on the table nearby to keep an eye on it.
So he can constantly look at the watch.
Yeah, because all he cares about is midnight, and he can't wait for it. And then I love this scene where they finally are fully intimate with each other, and it's a really beautiful, tender, playful. And Elio has this kind of like naivety about him, this innocent quality to him. He's very nervous. He doesn't know what to do. Like with Marcia, he's fine. But with Oliver, it's completely different. And Oliver kind of has to take the lead for him.
And Luca shot this in just a couple of very long takes, and it's really well done. And you can really see the chemistry between Armie and Timothy really get stepped up a notch in this scene. This is their first night having sex together and finally connecting emotionally and physically finally, which is something that Elio has been wanting for so long, and I'm sure Elio wanted it, and I'm sure Oliver wanted it too.
And the way Luca shot this is he didn't actually show any explicit sex in this film. In the novel, the scenes are very explicit, very drawn out, and very detailed. But Luca chose not to show the actual sex, and instead, when they are together on the bed and they're taking each other's clothes off, Luca pans the camera outside to the trees like billowing in the wind. And I read that some people were upset about this. They wanted to see the full-on sex scene. Luca explained that he chose not to show it because he didn't want the audience to lose any kind of connection to the characters. By keeping that hidden, you're constantly relating to them on a deeper level, not because of the sex, but because of the emotional and intimate connection between the characters. And he felt that he was worried that if he showed the sex, it might make some people lose their relatability to them.
Oddly, in the morning after they spend their first night together, Elio becomes very distant and quiet. Oliver kind of doesn't understand why he's reacting the way he is reacting. He feels like he may have maybe emotionally harmed him some way or something.
He's afraid he messed him up.
This point is odd because throughout the entire film, Oliver's this very confident, charismatic guy, but this is the first time we see Oliver is truly vulnerable. And this is probably something that he really has been hiding his entire life deep down inside of him, and it's finally come out, his true vulnerable personality. And you can just tell just the expressions on his face, and he's a lot more calm, and he's
worried.
He's worried about what he's done to upset Elio. And they go for that swim, and they swim very far apart. They don't even swim near each other. And then they come back, and obviously he perks him right up.
Yeah.
But I think that Elio is probably being so distant here because Elio, you can guess or assume, is finally fully in love with Oliver, and he really has this strong connection, and he realizes that it's only temporary, and Oliver is going to be leaving in a few weeks, and they wasted all his time, but also it's going to end, and he doesn't want to get too emotionally involved.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's why he's so distant, because he knows that this person I'm falling in love with is going to be gone from my life, and I'm probably never going to see him again. And so he's just become filled with despair about it.
But he's also still full of these sexual desires and impulses, and obviously that infamous peach scene, which is in the book. And I know Luca said that he had thought about cutting it, and the reason he kept it in is because obviously it's a very important scene to the novel and all fans of the book, but also he wanted to make sure that it was something that was possible. So he said that he tested it himself, and that he had Timothy test him out himself, and they both confirmed that it's possible, so that they decided to go for it.
Yeah, so Timothy Chalamet masturbated with a peach.
For real. They both did.
Hey, I mean, sure, if I was like 15, 16, and if I had a peach
full of
near me,
hormones.
I might have tried it.
And this peach scene, it marks the point where both Elio and Oliver are, succumbing to their feelings. And again, I said earlier, for me, it acts to me like a bridge between them emotionally, where Oliver Elio uses the peach to, take care of himself. And then Oliver ups the ante and goes to take a bite of the peach after he finds out what's been done to it. And I know in the book he actually eats the entire peach and says that he wants part of him inside of him forever. But they cut that, obviously, from the movie. But then Elio breaks down crying asking him why he's doing this to him. And it's hard. It's easy to interpret that in different ways. And when I see that, I think that this is Elio emotionally breaking down because someone finally cares about him so much, the way that he's wanted someone to care about him so much, and that he cares about Elio as much as Elio cares about Oliver.
I think that Elio breaks down here because he loves Oliver so much and can't stop thinking about how Oliver is going to leave soon. And from Elio's point of view, it doesn't seem that Oliver is really considering that he's leaving. And so I think that when he says, "Why are you doing this to me?" it's kind of like, why are you fucking with me? Why are you messing with me? Why are you playing with my heart? You know what I mean? So I think that's why he reacts that way, which makes Oliver realize, oh, I'm not being respectful to the fact that this is going to end soon, and I should be.
Yeah, and this kind of connects to the whole theme or the whole title of the movie, Call Me By Your Name, in that very iconic scene after their first night of making love, where Oliver asks Elio to call me by your name, and I'll call you by mine. And I interpret this as I said earlier, where they both kind of, or Elio saw things about Oliver that he wishes he was. And, you know, you can say that also Oliver probably sees things about Elio that he wishes he was. And they kind of both envy each other for what they are and who they are. And in a sense, this is a way of getting over that jealousy, and they're both accepting each other into their lives, and now they can experience, and now they both feel worthy now of being loved by the other person.
I think that they do the name trade because it represents them giving themselves up to the other person. So Elio's giving himself up to Oliver, and Oliver's giving himself up to Elio.
The third act of this film is very beautiful. Oliver has to take a trip for research for the university, so he's leaving the
And then
house,
he's gone for good.
and then he has to go back to America for good. And so Elio goes with him on this trip, and they have a wonderful time. They have a great trip together. And again, the music in this film is fantastic, and Luca picks so many great songs, a combination of like 80s pop music and classical music, a lot of piano songs.
It's actually a lot of the music that he grew up listening to.
There's a song called Love My Way by the Psychedelic Furs, which is played twice in this movie. The first time it's played is when before they're intimate together, where Oliver is dancing with the Italian girl, and Elio's just watching from a distance, smoking a cigarette, and it's an interesting scene because Elio seems kind of apathetic towards Oliver, or upset with him almost, or he's just watching Oliver, and it maybe kind of looks like he wishes he could either be the girl dancing or wishes that he could be Oliver. And then the next time it plays is when they're on their trip in that other town in Italy, that other city, and they find those Italians playing the same song outside of their car, and they're drunk and having a great time. And again, he watches Oliver dance with another Italian woman, but this time he's content and he's happy, and he's finally free, and he's finally there with Oliver.
When Oliver's dancing with the girl in the outdoor nightclub, it's the first time that we truly see how Elio feels about him. Because when Elio's sitting there and he's watching Oliver dance, you can see on his face he's upset and he's disturbed by it. He's just chain smoking his cigarette, and you can see there's tears in his eyes. And then his friends ask him to dance, and he says, "I'll go later." And so that's the first moment I think that he shows us how he feels about Oliver. The third act is they're kind of like playing couple for the weekend, but ultimately, you know, this relationship, it always had a time limit, and this getaway together, yes, it was so happy, and their love really grew in this, but it seems to end right before it started. It barely even got going.
Yeah, and that emotional train scene where we have that beautiful long take starting from the back of Chalamet as he watches the train go by, as Elliot watches the train go by, and it's very emotional to watch, and it's sad. And Chalamet's performance in this movie is remarkable, and I know people criticize him a lot. They say he's just moody and has no emotions, but Chalamet is an incredible actor and has immense depth, and this scene is so telling, and calling his mother on the phone to pick him up, and it gets me every single time, and it's so sad to watch that, like you just said, this relationship and this love just started, and it's over before it even began.
Yeah, and they can't even say anything to each other. They're so emotional on the goodbye. All they do is hug, and there's no dialogue spoken. But I agree. I think that this is obviously Chalamet's star-making role, but he's such a talented actor. He's so expressive. He can emote so much. It's a rare thing, and there's a reason why he's been Oscar nominated twice by now. And he obviously carries this movie, and he's gonna go down as one of the biggest actors there is.
Yeah, and if there's an antagonist in this film, there's a bad guy. It's time. Summer ends. Summer's over. It's only a certain amount of time, and seasons will change, and Oliver has to leave Elio. So time is the real antagonist in this movie.
Yeah, and I think when he has that talk with his father, and his father gives that amazing monologue, what he's telling him is that you feel horrible. You feel you're in pain and you're suffering right now, but that doesn't mean that you should block yourself off and you should shut yourself off from feeling these things, because it's a beautiful thing that you did experience this and had this relationship with someone, and even though it's over and they're gone, that doesn't mean that you close yourself off, because that's what makes us human. And you have to feel bad because that's part of life. Love's complicated. Love doesn't work out sometimes. And you have to be able to accept the tragedies of your life and then move on, and not repressing how you feel, but accepting it and taking it in and then learning from it and growing from it.
And he tells Elio that he's too smart not to know that what he had with Oliver was very special, and that Stolberg this is an amazing monologue by Stolberg, great actor, and his character had never experienced anything like that in his life. No matter all the years he's lived and the wisdom he's gained, he said he came close, but never had what they had. And this monologue, it reminds me every time of Good Will Hunting with Robin Williams.
Talking
to Matt Damon, talking to Will Hunting, and it's a very powerful speech. And I'm surprised he didn't get like an Oscar nomination for this, or at least something, because this speech was one of the most moving parts in the film.
Yeah, I agree. And then after that, we cut to winter, and some time has passed, and we're told this not just from the weather, but Elio's look and appearance is completely different. He's got a new fashion aesthetic. He's got new hair, and so quite a fair bit amount of time has passed since Oliver left.
And he seems, content. He seems like he's, moving on as best as he can.
Mm-hmm. And then Oliver calls, and he informs Elio that he's getting married. He's gonna get married. He says maybe married in the spring. Obviously, it's a tragic blow for Elio, and you can see it on his face and his reaction. But also, I think that Elio kind of tests Oliver here, where he calls Oliver Elio. He calls him by his name. Elio. And then Oliver replies Oliver. And so I think that Elio was testing if he still loved him. And Oliver obviously still does love him very much, and that's why he responded with Oliver.
And then we have that beautiful ending shot of Elio staring into the fireplace, and we have the Stefan Stevens song Visions of Gideon playing the entire time. And it's, while credits roll up during this, it's like a 2.5 minute take, and it's not something you should miss, and you should stay and watch the entire thing. If you don't switch off from Amazon, don't switch off from Netflix, watch this entire thing, because it's an amazing performance by Chalamet, just this 2.5 minutes, where he emotionally lives out the entire relationship of him and Oliver. In my opinion, when I watch this, every time you can see the stages of their relationship, the peaks and the valleys, the plateaus, the ups and downs, and the final climaxes and the pain. And you can see towards the end, he gets very angry and upset, and he's holding back all these tears. And then he finally has a look of possible acceptance, or maybe it's a look of, I'll see him again sometime or someday. And that it's either maybe he's letting go, or maybe he's just holding on to more hope.
Yeah, it's a powerful scene. And he actually, at the last moment, glances at us, the viewers, for a moment.
Yeah, it breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah, it breaks the fourth wall. It's a great little moment. And it's a powerful song to put on with the image of Elio crying, because, like you said, the lyrics of the song actually pertain to a breakup and about how, like, some of the lines are, "I have kissed you for the last time. Is it a video?" And I think it's kind of saying that, is it even real anymore? Is this love gone now, or is it just memories? Like, is it a video? Is it just something I remember? Did it even really happen? Is it a reality still, or is it just memories from my past? And so, I mean, this movie is a brilliant discussion and commentary on love and the loss of love and growth through that.
Elio speaks English, French, and Italian in this film. And Chalamet is actually fluent in French in real life, and then he picked up on and learned Italian for the movie, as well as he learned a lot of those classical piano pieces for the film and guitar. Despite there being various sex scenes in the movie, Armie Hammer said that the most uncomfortable scene he felt during the filmmaking was when he's dancing at that outdoor club, because he had to basically just dance with no music, like kind of by himself, and he said he was very uncomfortable doing it.
That makes sense because the dancing's pretty weird in that movie.
It is weird. It doesn't really go with the music.
Yeah, not at all.
They originally wanted to do full frontal nudity in this movie, but both Hammer and Chalamet refused to do it and put in their contract that they wouldn't have to do it, which is just kind of like an American thing. Obviously, European countries are much more open to sexuality and nudity in film and TV, but it's just something about America where full frontal nudity, for men especially, is just a big no-no.
It's ironic because women can get naked all the time, but then men don't want to get naked. So it is ironic with America.
In an interview on Quota Den in 2016, Timothy Chalamet revealed that Armie Hammer suffered wardrobe malfunctions from the short shorts he wore throughout the entire movie, and his testicles had to be digitally edited out of some of the scenes as a result.
He's wearing booty shorts this whole movie.
We also have a Patreon now, so you can support us there monthly, and also patrons get perks like personalized videos sent to them by us, sneak peeks at upcoming videos, and our top tier patrons also get a monthly shout out on the podcast once a month